Meera and Arjun's marriage was supposed to be a dream come true, but a single secret turned their Toronto apartment into a deadly trap, and one night would change everything forever. Meera had always imagined her wedding as the beginning of a peaceful and happy life. When she stepped off the plane in Toronto, she believed she had finally achieved what many in her hometown only dreamed of. Her marriage to Arjun had been arranged through distant relatives who described him as successful, respectful, and settled in Canada. The wedding in India had been filled with music, bright colors, and the blessings of elders who hoped she would bring honor to both families. Meera wore traditional red silk, her hands covered in henna, and her eyes full of hope. Arjun appeared calm and confident, surrounded by relatives who praised his achievements abroad. Everyone believed Meera was fortunate to be chosen. Once the ceremonies ended, Meera's family hugged her tightly and encouraged her to build a strong future. She carried their expectations across continents as she began her new life. The first drive from the airport made everything feel surreal. Tall buildings, wide roads, and winter air made Toronto seem like a different world compared to the warm, familiar streets she left behind. Arjun's apartment building stood high above the city, with mirrored windows that reflected the cold sky. To Meera, it looked modern and impressive, a place where she might find stability and purpose. Inside, she noticed the clean, minimal spaces, quiet hallways, shining floors, and neatly arranged furniture. Arjun's family welcomed her politely, presenting her with small gifts and soft smiles. Meera tried her best to adjust, reminding herself that every marriage required patience. She believed love would grow in time, and that Canada would bring her new opportunities. At that moment, she had no idea how drastically her life would change. All she saw was a hopeful future waiting to unfold. Meera tried to settle into her new surroundings, but within days she began noticing small signs that something was wrong. The apartment, though beautifully arranged, felt strangely lifeless. The silence inside the rooms was heavy, almost as if the walls were watching her. Every step she took echoed more than it should, and every sound she made felt out of place. She moved carefully, unsure of what was acceptable and what might be judged. Arjun's mother stayed with them temporarily, and her presence added a constant pressure. She observed Meera closely, taking note of how she folded clothes, how she cooked, and how long she spent in each room. Nothing harsh was said, yet the disapproving look spoke enough. Arjun, who had seemed gentle at the wedding, became distant. He left early for work and returned late, offering only brief acknowledgement of her existence. Meera tried to keep herself busy, organizing her belongings, learning the kitchen layout, and trying to prepare meals that would please the family. But despite her efforts, she sensed a growing coldness around her. Small mistakes, adding too much salt, arranging items differently than expected, or simply taking too long to complete a task, were met with stiff silence. She kept reminding herself that the first few weeks of marriage were always difficult. She told herself that adjusting to a new culture, a new home, and new expectations would take time. Yet the uneasiness continued to grow. The apartment's large windows offered a wide view of the city, but Meera often felt like she was trapped behind them, watching life unfold for others while she remained stuck in an invisible cage. It became clear that the warmth she hoped for was missing, replaced instead by an unsettling distance that slowly crept into every corner of her new life. Meera soon realized that her new life carried expectations far more rigid than she had imagined. Arjun's family held firm beliefs about purity, honor, and reputation, and these beliefs shaped almost everything around her. The topic was never discussed openly, yet it hung in the air like a silent rule she was expected to obey without question. Meera sensed that her past, something she had hoped would remain private, was slowly becoming the center of attention. She noticed small changes, whispers behind closed doors, sudden pauses in conversations when she entered the room, and glances exchanged between Arjun and his mother that hinted at suspicion. Her mother-in-law examined her belongings with unusual interest. Items from Meera's life in India, old photographs, a worn diary, folded papers she carried for personal memories, were quietly inspected. Sometimes she would find her bags moved from where she left them, or her closet rearranged without explanation. Nothing was said directly, but the message was clear: she was being evaluated, studied, and judged. The pressure intensified when Meera overheard relatives questioning her background during visits. They asked about her school, her friends, and her life before the marriage, digging carefully as if hoping to uncover something hidden. The weight of their expectations made her anxious. She feared that any detail from her past could be twisted into something unacceptable. Meera tried to maintain her composure, performing her duties with care, avoiding mistakes, and keeping her emotions tightly controlled. Yet she felt the walls closing in. She knew she was being watched, not for her well-being but for evidence of imperfection. Every day became a silent test, and the fear of failing it grew stronger. The truth she never shared, something she believed did not define her, now felt like a ticking threat ready to shatter her fragile new life. One quiet evening, while Meera was reorganizing her wardrobe, everything changed. Arjun returned home earlier than usual and began searching through the apartment with an intensity she had never seen before. He moved objects, opened drawers, and checked her belongings without a word. Meera stood frozen, watching him sift through items she held close to her heart. At first, she thought he misplaced something important. But the truth became clear when he reached her travel bag, unzipped the side pocket, and pulled out a folded medical document she had forgotten existed. The paper revealed a personal treatment she had undergone years earlier, something connected to a relationship she had once been in. It was not meant to define her, but it became the trigger for a storm she never anticipated. Arjun stared at the document for a long time, and although he said nothing, a chilling transformation spread across his face. The calm expression he once wore vanished, replaced by a silent and uncontrolled fury. From that moment, Meera sensed a dramatic shift in the atmosphere of the home. Arjun avoided looking at her, refused to answer simple questions, and behaved as if she no longer had a place in his life. The air around him felt heavy with resentment. Her mother-in-law began treating her with open stiffness, walking past her without acknowledgement and tightening her control over the household. Meera felt exposed and vulnerable, realizing the secret she kept for her own protection had now become a weapon against her. The apartment no longer felt like a home. It became hostile territory, where each movement placed her under invisible scrutiny. She slept lightly, worried about what might happen next. She had no idea how far Arjun's anger would go, but she sensed danger growing, slowly tightening its grip around her life. Meera's world shrank rapidly in the days that followed. Once she sensed the shift in Arjun's behavior, she tried to stay silent, hoping the tension would settle with time. Instead, the pressure grew worse. Arjun began restricting her routines without giving any explanation. Her phone, which once connected her to her family back in India, became a monitored object. He started checking her messages, reading her call history, and questioning every attempt she made to reach out to home. Soon, she stopped trying altogether, afraid her calls would only fuel his growing anger. Her outings became limited. She was told not to leave the apartment unless absolutely necessary. Trips to the grocery store, which once brought her brief moments of relief, were taken over by her mother-in-law. Meera was expected to stay inside, cook, clean, and remain within sight at all times. The apartment that once seemed impressive now felt like a cage built with cold walls and unspoken rules. The emotional distance between her and Arjun widened each day. He no longer ate meals she prepared, no longer responded when she spoke, and no longer acknowledged her presence unless it was to criticize something she had done. Even the sound of his footsteps approaching made her tense. She sensed that he was not simply disappointed, he was obsessed with the idea that she had betrayed him and his family. Nights were the hardest. The silence grew heavier, filling every corner of the darkened rooms. Meera lay awake for hours, feeling trapped in a situation she could not escape. She tried to find comfort in memories of home, but even those began to blur under the weight of her fear. Each day felt longer than the last, and she knew that whatever was coming next would not be something she could easily endure. Arjun's anger, once hidden behind silence, began to transform into something darker and more deliberate. Meera could sense the shift in his presence. He moved through the apartment with a certain calculation, as if he were studying every corner and memorizing every detail. His eyes no longer showed simple disappointment. They carried a cold, steady resentment that made Meera's skin crawl. She tried to avoid him, staying in the kitchen or the bedroom, but even there she felt his unspoken hostility pressing in like a shadow. Over time, Arjun became consumed with the idea of restoring his family's honor. Instead of stepping back or seeking help, he allowed his obsession to grow unchecked. He began spending long hours alone on the balcony, standing quietly while staring down at the alley behind the building. The wind would whip around him, but he did not seem to notice. Meera watched him from a distance, uneasy but unsure what he was thinking. She sensed danger, yet she could not identify its shape. Inside the apartment, he started rearranging furniture, clearing pathways, and leaving items in odd places. It felt as if he were preparing for something specific, something that required precision. He studied the balcony door frequently, checking its lock, testing how easily it opened, and observing how much force it took to move. His behavior grew more unpredictable, making Meera feel as though she was living beside a stranger with intentions she could not understand. Her mother-in-law's presence added to the tension. She neither interfered nor questioned Arjun's behavior. Instead, she acted as if everything was normal, which only deepened Meera's dread. Meera felt the atmosphere closing in, tightening around her like an invisible grip. She knew something was being planned, something she might not survive. But she could no longer see any path to safety or escape. The night everything changed arrived without warning, though Meera had sensed its approach for days. The air inside the apartment felt unusually still, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Outside, the winter wind howled through the narrow alley, rattling the balcony railing and creating a low, eerie whistle. Arjun moved quietly through the rooms, his footsteps slow and measured. Each sound seemed amplified in the silence, sending shivers through Meera as she tried to keep to the far side of the living room. The lights were dimmed, leaving large shadows stretching across the floor. Meera felt her heartbeat quicken as she noticed Arjun lingering near the balcony door. His posture was rigid, and the glare of the city lights reflected off the glass behind him, giving him a stark, unsettling silhouette. The atmosphere had shifted into something heavy and threatening, pressing against Meera's chest until breathing felt difficult. Her instincts told her to stay away, but the limited space offered little room to retreat. She stepped back toward the hallway, trying to create distance, yet Arjun's movements slowly narrowed the gap between them. His silence felt more dangerous than any words could have. Meera understood that she was standing on the edge of something irreversible. The wind outside grew louder, pushing against the balcony door as if trying to break in. The cold air seeped through the cracks, brushing against her skin like a warning. Meera's thoughts raced as she tried to find a way out of the room, toward the kitchen, the bedroom, anywhere that felt safer. But every path seemed blocked by Arjun's presence. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she realized she was cornered, the balcony looming behind him like an open threat. She understood then that the night was not simply tense or frightening. It was perilous. And whatever was about to happen would change everything in a matter of seconds. The moment that sealed Meera's fate unfolded in a blur of fear, force, and silence. The tension that had been building for weeks reached its breaking point as Arjun advanced toward her with a coldness that no longer tried to hide itself. The dim light cast moving shadows across the room, making the space feel distorted and unreal. Meera felt her back brush against the cool glass of the balcony door, and in that instant she understood fully that there was no escape left inside the apartment. Outside, the winter wind roared through the alley with a sharp, biting chill. The night sky hung heavy above the buildings, and the city lights flickered against the icy pavement below. Everything seemed distant to Meera except for the immediate danger standing inches away. Her breath came in shallow bursts as she struggled to remain steady. The sounds around her, rustling curtains, humming appliances, distant traffic, faded into nothing. A sudden movement shattered the thin line between dread and reality. Neighbors later described hearing a sharp, unmistakable thump against the balcony's metal railing. Meera's body was propelled outward, and gravity claimed her with merciless speed. The cold air rushed past her in a brutal gust as she fell from the height of the apartment. The lights of nearby windows blurred into streaks as the alley rose up to meet her. Her body struck the ground with a force that echoed through the narrow space. Snow drifted gently around her, settling on her clothes and hair, creating a stark contrast between the pure white flakes and the dark stains forming beneath her. Her wedding bangles, still on her wrists, glinted faintly under the flickering street lamp. A nearby resident who glanced out of their window froze at the sight and immediately called the police. Within minutes, sirens filled the air. Paramedics rushed to her side, but the fall had been too severe. The alley, once quiet and forgotten, had become the scene of a tragic and irreversible crime. Police arrived quickly, sealing off the alley as investigators examined the scene. The sight before them was alarming: Meera's lifeless body lying in the snow, her jewelry scattered, her clothing torn from the impact. The situation immediately raised suspicion. The height of the fall, the angle of her landing, and the bruising visible even through the layers of winter clothing suggested that something more than an accident had occurred. Officers documented every detail, marking footprints, photographing the balcony above, and collecting anything that could help explain what had happened. Inside the apartment, Arjun appeared unusually calm. He claimed Meera had jumped on her own, insisting that she had been depressed and unstable. His statement lacked emotion, and detectives took note of his detached demeanor. They asked him simple questions about the events leading to the night, but his answers were vague and often contradictory. While he maintained his innocence, his behavior created more doubts than clarity. Detectives expanded their investigation by examining phone records, messages, and emails. They discovered restrictions placed on Meera's communication, revealing a pattern of control. Deleted text messages hinted at growing tension in the marriage. Surveillance footage from the building showed Meera staying inside for long periods, rarely leaving without another family member present. The evidence painted a picture of isolation rather than voluntary withdrawal. An autopsy provided further insight. Meera had fresh bruises on her arms and shoulders, consistent with someone being grabbed or pushed. The report ruled out the possibility of her jumping voluntarily. The injuries showed signs of forceful impact before the fall, contradicting Arjun's version of events. Neighbors were interviewed, and several reported hearing a loud noise before the fall, followed by silence in the apartment above. One resident mentioned seeing lights turn off seconds after the sound, as if someone had intentionally tried to hide what had happened. As detectives pieced together the timeline, the truth became increasingly clear. Meera's death was not a tragic accident but the result of deliberate violence. And the person responsible was much closer than Arjun wanted anyone to believe. Arjun's arrest marked the beginning of a long and painful process for everyone involved. The police formally charged him with second-degree murder, and the case quickly drew attention both locally and internationally due to its shocking nature. Meera's family, still reeling from grief, traveled from India to Canada to witness the legal proceedings. Their hearts were heavy with sorrow, yet they remained determined to ensure that justice was served for their daughter. Every step of the investigation and court process reminded them of the life that had been stolen, of the dreams and hopes that ended far too soon. The courtroom became a place of confrontation, where the truth about Meera's final days was laid bare. Evidence collected by investigators, including CCTV footage, medical reports, and witness testimonies, painted a stark picture of isolation, fear, and escalating violence. Arjun maintained his calm, almost rehearsed demeanor, but the details revealed in court left little doubt about his role in her death. For the first time, Meera's story was given the attention it deserved, exposing the hidden cruelty behind a seemingly perfect marriage. As the trial unfolded, the public learned about the dangers that can arise when obsession, control, and rigid societal expectations collide. Meera's death became a symbol of the vulnerabilities many women face, particularly when cultural pressures and fear of judgment override compassion and human decency. Her story resonated with viewers, sparking conversations about honor, trust, and the importance of protecting the most vulnerable. The judge delivered a long prison sentence, holding Arjun accountable for his actions. Though no sentence could undo the pain or bring Meera back, justice provided a measure of closure. Her family returned to India carrying her memory, determined to honor her life. Meera's story became a chilling reminder of how quickly a dream life can turn into tragedy, urging others to remain vigilant against control, deceit, and violence hidden behind closed doors.